Want to know more about oil pastel techniques? Meet local artist Cara Andre. In this studio visit, Cara will tell us about her artwork, why she makes paintings and drawings, and how she creates them.
Hi everybody, I'm Cara Andre, and I'm an instructor at the University of Arkansas. I teach drawing, painting, and foundations. I started making art the way most people do. I just never stopped drawing. I've been here in northwestern Arkansas for the past 5 years now. This is my studio in my house. Welcome. It's very convenient to have my workspace in my house because I can wander in at any time of the day or night. I can come in my pajamas with a cup of coffee and just look and think and make. My current project is comprised of making collages out of acrylic paintings. The work is rooted in abstraction. I take inspiration from the things around me, like how the sky looks at a particular time of day. It could be odd color combinations that I experience when I'm out in the world. For example, there's a very weird pink dumpster outside of the Joann Fabrics in Fayetteville, or the piles of things on my desk. I make little paintings inspired by those colors or shapes or spaces, and then cut them apart and rearrange them into new compositions. The goal is to find joy and transform and create something new. My advice to anyone who wants to be an artist, or anyone who just wants to make things and be creative, is to practice. How I practice is by having a sport in the studio. I have my sport drawing and my sport painting, but it's something I regularly do to keep myself moving, to keep myself thinking in new ways, to keep myself building skill. There's value in making anything. It all comes back to help you in the end. You know, drawing a figure gives me a new way to think about structure. Painting the sky gives me a new way to think about color. And so anything you do is important. You just have to do it. Oil pastel is a really interesting medium. It is incredibly vibrant. It's also incredibly messy. It has kind of a sticky oiliness to it. It kind of gloops and glops over the surface of the paper. When I introduce oil pastels in the classroom, my students don't want to touch it. They think it's gross. I make them do a lot of drawings with oil pastels. And within that process of moving through a lot of drawings in a short amount of time, they pretty quickly get to the point where they say, oh, I think I get it now. Or they'll say things like, if I treat oil pastel like clay, it works. You know, you can't force an oil pastel drawing to be as precise as a graphite drawing. Find the unique qualities of the medium and let it do its thing. You know, you'll get to something that's really surprising and really interesting if you work with the medium instead of against it. I created a sport drawing using a combination of charcoal and oil pastel, and I chose to do a self-portrait for this sport drawing. And there were a couple of goals I had. One goal was trying to achieve some sort of likeness to myself. Another goal I had was to emphasize the unique qualities of oil pastels within the drawing. I began the drawing in charcoal as a way to contrast the chunkiness of the oil pastel. In the final version of the drawing, you can see that the parts of myself that are further away from the viewer remain in charcoal. And then I used a combination of black and white oil pastel to bring out the parts of the portrait that would be closer to the viewer. So things like the tip of my nose, or the edges of my glasses, or my hair that comes out in front of my shirt. And I pushed the kind of goopiness, the kind of chunky quality of the oil pastel to pull those parts of the portrait forward. And it's very clear, what parts are closest and what parts are furthest. Another thing I did is that I was utilizing an X-Acto knife. There are places where the chunkiness of the oil pastel is a little difficult to get, just the right shape with that kind of chunky stick. What I would do is go back in with a blade and carve out some of the shape so that I could get something a little more precise, a little more intentional. All of those aspects, this idea of space, this idea of going after a likeness, this idea of altering the medium with other tools, were important considerations for me during the making of this sport drawing. I really enjoyed sharing my studio practice and my thoughts with you today. I hope you feel inspired and motivated to go on and create some wonderful things. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to watch the other videos on this page to learn how to make oil pastel paintings of your own and continue creating together.